and stage an invasion.
Welcome to the Prophecy Chronicles with your host, Paul Richard Price.
Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever in the world you are right now. It's Paul Richard Price here with another episode of the Prophecy Chronicles show on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. And thank you to all of you worldwide who are listening to the show, and to those of you listening at 105.5 FM in New Orleans, thank you again. My guest for hour one tonight will be Rob Simone. Now, Rob Simone is a talk show host with his own UFO Paranormal Radio talk show that he does here on the network, and it's also broadcast in England and Australia as well. And tonight's subject will be the Great UFO Conspiracy. Now, as we know, many years ago, Hollywood started making movies dealing with the possibility of alien-human interaction. We could go as far back as Flash Gordon in the 40s, up until Independence Day, and even beyond that, more recently. And Rob, I'd like to thank you again for being on my show again. And how are you doing?
Paul, it's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate all the hard work you and Joe do to make all of this great radio happen.
Well, thank you, and you're welcome, by the way. And what I'd like to find out, I mean, you're the one who brought up the topic for tonight's show when I called you. And by the way, I want to thank you again for being a last-minute addition, and I think my listeners will enjoy what you have to say. Now, let me ask you, you know, we could go as far back as the 1940s, even before the Roswell incident, where movie serials were actually looking into the fact that we may end up contacting alien life, even as far back as Flash Gordon, as I said, and even more than that before. And what is the big secret, Rob, that the Hollywood elite are not telling people? Do they believe in unidentified flying objects? And if so, are they keeping it secret amongst themselves and just releasing the information as fiction?
Well, you know, Hollywood wasn't around back then. There were movies being made, and yeah, a lot of them dealt with Mars and the moon and spacemen and things like that. But this was before this empire of secrecy that was built up after Roswell. So, and it really was. And this empire of secrecy, we can see now, is starting to crumble. If people were looking on Google News or Yahoo News, they'll see that recently a report came out from England as they slowly start to release their government files. Once in a while, a file that gets released makes national headlines, and that was the case last week when it was discovered that in these, these documents that come out slowly but surely, turns out one of them had to do with Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, and Winston Churchill. They had in front of them this case of one of their RAF, the Royal Air Force pilot during World War II, had this extraordinary encounter with a UFO. Now, back then, the heads of state talked to each other, and it was as easy, because there was no huge military-industrial complex really at that point. So is this ours? No. Well, you think it's the Germans? It couldn't be. Well, then it's nobody's, and it's coming from somewhere else. This is what they deduced. And they also said in these documents that it should be kept secret throughout the duration of the war and even longer. And it was until 2010. Now, did Eisenhower or Churchill imagine the wildest dreams that this cover-up would have gone so far? I dare say no. Eisenhower did warn us in his last speech as president against the unwanted effects and of the military-industrial complex. and that just landed on deaf ears. But when you called me today, actually, the reason why I'm on the air tonight is because of, once again, the thing that makes the world go round, synchronicity. I was just leaving Paramount Studios. I had a meeting there with a producer who's been in Hollywood for years and years and years and years. And she is really an amazing person. And in fact, I was in there pitching a new television show about UFOs. It's something that we've been planning for weeks now, and it just kept getting pushed around, and today was finally the day. So I'm in there, and I'm walking around the studios, and there's Edward James Olmos, and they're filming everything. It's a huge complex that they just use to film everything. The coffee shop and everything gets used in they use every little square foot of this thing that they can. And so as I'm driving out, Paul calls me and says, hey, I've got an opening. And I thought, well, this is what I should talk about, because this is what I've been personally experiencing. I've been in Los Angeles now for about 6 years. And I have been in the UFO field for 15. And it's just how things happened that have led to this extraordinary encounters that have to do with Hollywood. For people who don't know, I was part of an organization called CAUSE, Citizens Against UFO Secrecy, back in the late 90s out of Sedona, Arizona. I had a paralegal degree, and I was just wanting to get into the UFO field, and there was an attorney who was suing the government for information about UFOs using the Freedom of Information Act. So I volunteered, put my money where my mouth was for a year, and we sued the government, and it was an amazing time. One of our cases went to the Supreme Court, and we were on our bell all the time. And then from there, I traveled around the world for 3 years exploring this phenomenon in every corner of the globe, going through 27 different countries. And that's a whole other tale. And then ended up in radio, and I've been on the air on 104.4 FM in London ever since. So now that I'm in L.A., I've been bouncing around, and I've had this extraordinary encounter because I've been lucky enough to get involved in TV and films and writing, and everybody I know is in the business and all different levels, and it's just been really extraordinary. So coming from my background, I'm looking at all this stuff a little bit different. And every time I'm at one of these parties, the conversation always gets steered toward what I do. And I tell people, sometimes I bring them in quick, sometimes I bring them in soft. Or somebody who's standing around me that knows me will blurt out that I, wrote a book about crop circles, UFOs, and the whole conversation goes in a completely different direction. But so when Paul called me, I said, let's talk about the great Hollywood UFO conspiracy. And, where does it begin and where does it end, if it does end? Because it's as it stands now, there's no signs of it slowing down. But to get back to sort of the history of the thing, Hollywood, of course, has always been fascinated by this. It's made tons of money. And I heard, and I read an article about the CIA infiltrating these parties out in Hollywood, getting a hold of these producers, and trying to get a crowbar into various productions. And you know what? I think that is absolutely true. I think there has been a continual and effective and now seamless integration of the intelligence community and these major studios on various different levels, depending upon the project. And can I point to a singular conspiracy or a singular message that's either being hidden or covered up? No. But what strikes me lately is that if I had to count all the pictures that have dealt with mind control, they would add up quicker than you can imagine. If you look at Inception, that's a form of it right there. If you look at the other Leonardo DiCaprio film with Martin Scorsese about the Shutter Island, that's another one. If we look at The Manchurian Candidate, if we look at the Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, again and again and again and again and again, there seems to be this, continual fascination, not only with things that are paranormal, but with things having to do with controlling the human mind. So I think we should mention those two in tandem as we begin our discussion. So that's sort of just a background for some of the things I'm going to impart. And again, this is all first person. And I've just been sort of just rambling around. I'm pretty lucky. I get to sort of ramble a bit. I don't have a 9-to-5 job that I clock into, so I end up just drifting out, in all these different scenes. And what I have found, I think, is pretty extraordinary. Just to give you an example, every so often, especially when he's in town, Jeff Goldblum will play his piano. He has a jazz ensemble that he plays with. And he plays in this little club in Beverly Hills. It's by invitation only. And I've been going to see him now for 4 years. Somehow I just ended up, on this list. And he just sits down, and there's 80 people there, and he just hangs out, plays, and people come up, and it's a scene. So, having gone there a number of times, during the break, I started to talk to him. I said, you've been in all these UFO movies, Christ. He's been in, Buckaroo Banzai. He's been on Independence Day. I mean, you name it. This guy has been in these films. And I said, so I really want to know your opinion of extraterrestrial life. Now, remember, it's 11:30 at night. Everyone's been drinking. It's a small, it's a underground club. Not underground in the sense that you think, but it's a cozy place. And, this is the time when people generally, tell the truth. And it turns out that Jeff, having worked with Steven Spielberg on a number of occasions, was mostly influenced by who? Steven Spielberg, who, of course, did all these movies with him, Jurassic Park, and, it goes on and on and on. So I was like, okay, well, how's that? And he says, well, Steven, of course, has been into this field for a long time. He is the UFO guy, Close Encounters, and the World of Worlds. I mean, you name it. This guy is it. And he, in between takes and all these things, in between shoots and shots, he would talk with and this is the word he used, unbridled passion about the UFO subject, the reality of it as was explained to him by his high-level insiders, and about some of his own personal contact experiences. Now, normally, Paul, this is where you'd interject and say something like, oh, is that right? Or, tell me more. That is if you're still there. Oh dear, you haven't put the kettle on, have you?
Apologize to everybody. We had a little bit of a technical issue, and we're back. And the question I wanted to ask you is that I know that I've heard, Rob, that there have been several in the past, even going back to George Powell up to Steven Spielberg, and even more recently, Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich, speaking of Independence Day, where it's been rumored that they knew and had inside information given to them about the UFO cover-up and all. And can we talk about that and what you might know?
Okay, well, you heard the last thing I was talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I want to make sure. It occurs to me, Paul, that maybe there are forces at work so powerful that we must not speak above a whisper when we speak in condemnation of them. It is they, too, perhaps, who have sabotaged the Seer radio show, knowing that the unbridled truth that was about to come out would be so damaging and explosive that they had to take drastic measures.
Well, I didn't know that my show was that important, but people, now you know. And you know...
Sorry, I just had to throw that tangent out. Okay, what was your question again?
Well, the point I was making is there have been many people, even I've talked to Bob Emenegger and others, George Powell, Steven Spielberg, where it has been rumored, however, Rob, that these individuals were given inside knowledge and inside information regarding the truth about the UFO condition.
Of course,
and have you heard any? Go ahead, please.
Well, this is true, because if you look at Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and I was just talking about Steven Spielberg, and he actually did say back in the 70s that he was a UFO abductee to a trusted friend. And he used to talk about it in a much more open way than he ever has in the 80s, 90s, or on. But that's something he used to talk about. He used to say that it happened to him, and he was fascinated by it, and that's what drives his passion. He's not interested in making movies for commercial value. That's not what's ever driven him. He is a tried and true filmmaker. If you watch one of his first movies that launched him, was called The Duel. It was all about cinematography and the use of the lens and classic movie making. He's not interested in furthering the subject matter. He's not interested in getting truths out that's hidden by blockbuster entertainment. No, he follows his passion. He made a movie about Munich, about the Mossad, and then these secret assassinations. He made a movie Amistad. He made a movie about the Jews in the prison camps. He makes movies about what he wants to make about. And why does he want to make movies about abduction, the people coming out of the ship and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and people getting taken aboard and all that stuff? Why? Because it's part of who he is. Just like Schindler's List. Just like all these other movies that he's done. He's personally affected his sphere, his inner sphere. Munich's the same way. He's a Jewish guy. He probably knows a bunch of people from Israel. He probably knows people that tell some story about the Mossad in the old days. He was endlessly curious about it. He makes things that affect his life. That's why all those movies at the beginning of his career were about UFOs and ships and things like that. So, but beyond that, to answer your question more specifically, if you look at Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you will see that there was this landing, this controlled landing, this anticipated landing, and the military, set it up. That actually took place, so we're staying at the Holloman Air Force Base, and there's actually a small clip of this that exists and showed up briefly in that Walt Disney documentary. Now, you know about this, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And so what we think is that it was sort of an homage to that event. He changed enough of it, he put it at the Devil's Tower, and on and on and on, and then created this, dramatic farce about people being contacted. But even his touch was great because he got Jacques Vallée, to be a part of this, and he used the top UFO, one of the top UFO researchers of all time, the real UFO researcher, to come in and talk to about this. Now, a guy who's just making a movie to show teenagers, to make money, to make profits, would not have brought Jacques Vallée in. This clearly is a man who was driven by his own personal influence, his own personal experience. And that's why we have that rare combination, Steven Spielberg, of a filmmaker and a contactee, and most assuredly an abductee of some sort. Now, beyond what happened, that starts getting fuzzy real quick. But yeah, he had access to all kinds of military guys, active and retired. And he could snap his fingers and these guys would come and talk. And you'd never know about it. These guys would never reveal because they want to do right by him. Having Steven Spielberg as a friend is a lot better than having him, as someone who dislikes you, obviously. So yeah, now, but I don't think that that's important. Yeah, he had a lot of inside information. He knows stuff that he could never put on the screen. But I think the real interesting story is not the contact, the information he gets from other people, but his personal drama himself.
Well, and I want to encourage my listeners in the Pal Talk chat room to go ahead and ask any questions of Rob, and I will go ahead and refer them directly to him. Now, what we're looking at right now, if you don't mind me bringing this one up to you, is the fact that not only him, but it was rumored that when Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich made Independence Day, and even previous to that, Stargate, that some of these Hollywood types got their information directly from Pentagon sources. And is, in my opinion, is this what, Rob, they're trying to do to help assimilate people directly into belief?
Well, hold on. Now, see, now the ground under you is starting to get a little crumbly. Yes, these guys have military advisors, and I'll tell you a funny anecdote about this. True story. This speaks exactly to what you're talking about. There's an actor I know, I won't say his name, and it was just at this little house tucked away in these windy little roads in the Hollywood Hills. Well, I have a writing partner who invited me to go and just have there's a barbecue happening. So we're just sitting around there, and there's a couple of Italian guys, and I'm talking to this one guy, and hours go by, and we finally start talking about, the UFO subject, or what I do. He tells me he was in an airport, and he was talking to this guy, a real, gritty, salty military guy. And they were sitting, killing time in an airport, and this actor said, oh, okay, you're okay. So he said, well, what are you doing in town, or, what are you doing in L.A.? And he said, I'm the military advisor for Stargate. And then he sort of jumped or halted or got all funny, and as if he had said something that he shouldn't have said. And this actor guy thought that was really weird, and I didn't really think it was that strange, because again, all of these movies that have anybody in a uniform will have a military advisor. So, but his question was, why would they have a guy as serious and well decorated as this fellow he met at the airport? He was a full bird colonel, and had really quite a pedigree. And the answer is, well, I don't know. I mean, you might have to need an advisor when it comes to helping you understand how they walk, talk, and salute and things like that. And you might need to know the pecking order, and you want to know basic stuff, even if it's a scripted show like Stargate Universe. But he seemed to think that it was the well was much, much deeper. So as far as any scripted show, any drama, any science fiction, yes, they might have a military advisor. It's perfectly understandable. But beyond that, I don't think that we can really, I don't think there's a lot of evidence to point to anything sinister. Do you?
Well, I'm not trying to say that it was sinister. What I'm trying to say is that they're trying to acclimate us and prepare us.
That's sinister. That's sinister. If you're talking about acclimating and altering people's minds and propagating a dogmatic or even or some sort of cohesive, process of mind, that is sinister.
Well, in my opinion, though, I think that, how do you prepare people for what may be the eventual contact with an alien race? And I don't think that they're meaning to do it in a sinister way. It may be coming across that it is that way, but they want to help to prepare us for that eventual happening. And I have a question. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, well, no, people have been talking about this for a while. I have yet to see a defined message or program of indoctrination or anything else as it relates to this. I think the movies probably just do it on their own. When it comes to these contact stories, they keep getting better and better. But anyway, what's your question?
Well, the question from Lily in the chat room is, you mentioned it before, that about the Disney movie narrated by Robert Urich, about preparing us for alien contact. And she wants to know if you saw the movie and what did you think about it?
Okay, you're talking about the documentary that was made by Walt Disney, right?
Yes.
Yeah, now, I have seen some of it, and the odd thing is about this thing is that Walt Disney himself comes on in the beginning. which is extremely unheard of. And he says a little thing at the beginning, again, never having done that before for any other documentary. And it's all standard fare until you get to a certain point where literally if I had to really narrow it down, it's about, I'm looking at my watch right now, it's about 3.5 seconds of this actual fuzzy clip of this UFO sort of hovering, over an Air Force base. It's there. And people have been trying to get this documentary for a long time. I remember I would call Walt Disney Studios. I had to talk to the legal department because we wanted to use it in a television show. So it's hard to come by. But I'll tell you something else about Walt Disney. A friend of mine, her father used to work with Walt Disney, and she would tell me, or even let me listen to these tapes that her father would make. He was kind of a motivational speaker, and he talked about Walt Disney, and he talked about his brother that they used to run things with, and Walt was he was a peculiar guy. He was an extreme manic perfectionist, and he would not do anything without a considerable amount of thought. I mean, he told the story about this Pirates Cove in Walt Disneyland here in California, where he would actually go into these restaurants and things and talk to the people and find out what they liked and didn't like. And one lady from Florida, this is back in, I don't know, the 80s, she said, well, I like it, but there should be mosquitoes or fireflies here. And then Walt gets on the phone to this guy and he says, we need fireflies. We've got to have fireflies at these things. And they all of a sudden, they now had to make these fireflies, which are still there today. So I say that to say that there was a time during the 80s, maybe late 70s, that things got kind of shifty. We saw these little cracks come out. And I don't know, I mean, Walt Disney has done some pretty interesting things, and he's been accused of some mind control himself with that cartoon Fantasia. But we really don't know for sure. We don't have the evidence. We don't have anything that we can hold up in a court of law. What we do have is simply a snapshot of the measure of the man, of this odd documentary that came out. But it's really hard just from that to point to any, grand scheme.
Well, and I agree with that. And the big thing that I, see from the documentation I've read and from talking with other people, Rob, is that the United States government may be wanting to acclimate people for, the express purpose to get them prepared for what President Ronald Reagan, an actor, stated in his UN address about a potential contact with an alien race. And if you look at, let's take, for example, Independence Day. They had military help on that film up until the point when they started mentioning Groom Lake or Area 51. And then the Air Force and Department of the Defense then pulled out of the movie at that particular point in time because they did not want any references to Area 51. Now, if we're looking at that, and from what I've heard, they did get some detailed information that let them know how to develop the sets for the Area 51 scenes from people who actually worked at Area 51. And if we're looking at that, is there any truth that maybe there are aliens out at Area 51, and that the CIA, either covertly or not, are actually giving the information out to people to prepare for alien contact?
Don't know. It's a 50-50 guess there.
Okay, and when are you going to write a book on this subject?
Well, let me tell you another little funny anecdote that I heard. Ronald Reagan, he, of course, governor. Before he was governor, he was an actor, and there's a great story that he, I think, and Nancy actually came in contact with a UFO on their way to this party. It was probably like the late 50s or early 60s, and they were driving on Mulholland, which is actually not too far away from me. It's just if you go up from West Hollywood, you just drive up Beverly Glen, and then there's this Mulholland in the hills. And the story goes that on his way to some party, he had this UFO experience. And I think, as the story goes, that Nancy was in the car, but she was not called. She was just sort of frozen, and Ronnie got out and saw these lights by the side of the road, and as far as we know, had some sort of conversation. But it's a sketchy story, but it wouldn't put it past me, because Ronnie was also one of these guys that had his little glimmers, in front of the General Assembly in the UN. He talks about this alien force that could possibly come, into humanity and make everybody forget about the national borders and boundaries. If you really want to talk about indoctrination and people pulling the strings, you got to look at the Rockefellers. Lawrence Rockefeller and the others have spent millions of dollars funding UFO projects back in the 80s and early 90s. Lawrence Rockefeller himself used to come to the White House when Bill Clinton was in office, and it was a time that is called the Rockefeller Initiative. Why? Because he had open access to the White House, and he would come in, and he was pushing for UFO disclosure. He was pushing for a release of documents. And guess who else was at that time that we know, that's on the record? His former chief of staff, John Podesta. John, after the Clinton administration, went on the record, it's a public thing, he said it, I think he said it at the National Press Club, he said the government should release the UFO information. And since then, Podesta has been working away in the think tank. And right now, he's still very much active in the Obama administration, walking in and out. Now, is he talking about UFOs? No. They're probably talking about, important things, like Social Security and health care. But it seems to me that that's an interesting place to start, because it spreads beyond that. When Bill Clinton was in office, he asked Webster Hubble to find out who shot JFK, and if Area 51 was real. Webster went out and tried to get the answer, but was rebuffed. These presidents aren't always briefed. They're only there for 40 years. Why should they? Is the thinking of the military complex. Beyond that, we have Hillary Clinton now, who was in close contact with Lawrence Rockefeller, who went to visit Lawrence Rockefeller at one of his ranches. And there's a photograph of Lawrence and Hillary Clinton walking, and guess what Hillary is holding? She is holding a book. Now, when we learned that they were spending time together, the question was immediately, well, were they talking about UFOs? And if so, what were they talking about? So then this photograph emerges. It's just a press photograph. I think it was from Reuters or AP, that she's holding this book. And so what we think was that Lawrence gave her this book, and it later was identified as a UFO book, because we have enough of the back cover to actually match it up. So here we have Hillary Clinton, during the Clinton administration, holding a UFO book, walking with Lawrence Rockefeller. Now, we know what they were talking about. The extent of it is still unclear. Coming back to the Hollywood angle, cut to, was it 2 years ago when Hillary was running for president. There was a fundraiser here it was in Beverly Hills. It was Beverly Wilshire. And they have these fundraisers where it costs, $1,000, $2,000 a plate to sit down. And I certainly wasn't in the mood to spend that kind of money. But I got to go nonetheless. A friend of mine who was invited, because he's involved in these peace events. He's from abroad, and he is also part of. He has he's part of a royal family of a country overseas. I'll put it that way. So I was working with him for quite a while, and he got this invitation to go to this fundraiser. He couldn't go. Something came up. And as crazy as that sounds, I mean, I guess he's sort of, he's been around enough that wasn't such a big deal for him. So I went in his stead. I had this, this invitation, and you go in, and you're checked and frisked and poked and prodded, and then finally we're sitting around, and there we were. We're sitting around there, so we couldn't. So what happened? Me, the UFO researcher, standing in the Beverly Wilshire, I asked her. I started talking about blogging and people blogging about the Rockefeller Initiative, and I had to ask it, but I had to be as diplomatic as possible. And what she said was what I think pretty extraordinary, because, she said she was at that ranch. She knew that Lawrence Rockefeller was into this subject and spoke about it often. Now, she admits this. What we're still trying to figure out, if she's been read into the program whatsoever, if she's a sleeper cell, or whether or not she just couldn't be bothered. We don't know. We don't know how far this reaches. But we do know it goes from Hollywood, it goes from the Rockefeller family, it goes to the White House, it goes to the president. Jimmy Carter saw a UFO, put it on the record. It goes to the chief of staff. It goes to the Kremlin. It goes to the Russian Air Force Base. We know it goes to Winston Churchill now and President Eisenhower. So if that's what we know, just on blind luck, imagine what we'd know if we had more access.
Well, speaking of access, you answered pretty much a question that Angela Joyner had asked in the chat room about your contact with Hillary Clinton.
Oh, yeah, Angela, I remember Angela. How you doing? Yeah.
And was there anything that you can talk about that would indicate what she may have said to you in that contact you had with her that she is not currently making public now?
No.
UFOs.
Well, it's, oh boy. Well, I don't. I really don't. I'll tell you something else though, along those lines. Shirley MacLaine, one of the greatest actresses of all time, and of course she wrote the book Out on a Limb, and she really brought spirituality into the modern lexicon. She is an amazing person. I was lucky enough to sit down with her at her house out in New Mexico. We talked for hours and hours and hours and hours. And, she knows the presidents. She's known practically all of them. She knows everybody. She literally is a force to be reckoned with. And I say that to let you know that she was really good friends with Jimmy Carter. They had a really close relationship. I mean, not, inappropriately close, but, she was a trusted friend, I'll put it that way. She was on the phone to Billy Carter all the time, and Billy Carter used to say to her how frustrated he was because Billy Carter, before he became president, saw a UFO in the company of 30 other people, even filled out a form stating it, and that's easy to find on the Internet. And he wanted to get this information out. Because why? Again, like Steven Spielberg, he was personally driven to do so. It wasn't under orders. Most of the amazing things that happen in this world is because of people's personal drive. The Mona Lisa, the Hanging Towers of Babylon. He was ordered. This wasn't an oath, a security oath to a nation that accomplished the greatest things in the world. It came out of something much more deep. When you look at the pyramids, when you look at the other stuff, that comes from a drive that cannot be equaled by some military might or a gun or a club where people salute each other. So I say that, again, it reinforced the understanding that when Spielberg makes these movies, this is why he's making them. When Jimmy Carter was trying to get the information but was turned away time and time again, that's what he was trying to do it. And I think he made a promise during the campaign that he'd look into it. But so did we have it on tape. So did George Bush and George Bush Sr. They were caught on tape saying that they'll look into it. And of course they never did, because it's the fourth rail of politics, and people who think that Obama is suddenly going to embrace this issue, it's not going to work either. There are levels of reality that has to take place. We have people in poverty. We have foreclosures. We can't have a president that's spending time on that. It's something that the American people would understand or support by any measure. It's political suicide. So that's I threw that in there just to let you know that there have been presidents that have been tried to look into it, but again, they don't get to find out. Why? Because after Roswell, this was covered up. The Cold War mentality took over, and it's been compartmentalized ever since. so one hand doesn't know. It's somewhere, it's there, it's here, it's there. It's the way the machine operates. It's in these different closed segments. And don't let it get you down, as Neil Young used to say. It's only castles turning. Just find someone who's... Oh, it's only castles burning. Just find someone who's turning, and you'll come around. Anyway, you shouldn't get bummed out, because, yes, there are a lot of people, celebrities and whatnot, who've had these experiences, and I'll tell you some more in a minute, if you like, but disclosure can happen for anybody right now. You don't have to wait the government to say it's okay before you can start believing in a larger universe. Because with this expanded consciousness, this expanded outlook, at the very least, comes a wealth of opportunity, calmness, and centeredness, and potential that you should not miss out on simply because your logical mind has not been satisfied to the point where you think it should be with pictures and things like that. Because if that's where you're at, if you're one of the people who can just write stuff off really quick, well, you probably do it for a whole lot of other things as well. It's really easy to close the door. Sometimes it's hard to open one when you know it'll mean that you have to change, that you can't be, that you have to stop being who you were, even though you were dysfunctional and ineffectual. People still cling to themselves and the people around them, and they don't like to move forward. This field, the stuff that we're talking about, is for searching souls, and it's not easy to do.
Well, and I have a few more questions. One, now I do know you know who Angela Joyner is, from the Joyner Report and all. She has insisted that I ask you specifically this particular question, and I hope you don't mind, okay?
Hit me.
She wants to know if during your meeting with Hillary, first of all, this is a multi-question question. First of all, did any of her handlers ask you not to reveal anything about the meeting until after Super Tuesday? 2, did you ask Hillary if she had questioned anybody on the UFO subject, anyone in particular, or if her husband has himself? And did Clinton order a new Roswell investigation?
Okay, on those questions, no, none of those specific questions. Now, the meeting that took place, and she did have handlers, but fortunately, it was a time when people were sort of gathering around and, maybe just sort of peppering her with questions, and you have to sort of mingle in and mingle out. And what happens is you'll get a little FaceTime, and somebody else will come along, and then you try to steer the conversation back, so it wasn't a proper, cohesive dialogue. But I felt as though it was important to ask it because, because again, it has to do with more than just a political party or who's going to become president. It has to do with a legacy of humanity that I've spent a great deal of time and effort, my own money, putting in the time for the betterment of myself and others. There's no, this is not a way to get rich quick by any means. This is again, comes from a particular passion. And when you talk about this, I know someone, a good friend of mine, someone I work with, she actually got to sit next to Oprah one time, and she asked Oprah about this UFO. She said, I think the way she came at it was, and again, you always have to couch these questions in a certain way, and I have another anecdote on that in a second, but she's like, you had, this is when Oprah was back a long time ago, she said you had on the famous abductee researcher, the guy from Harvard, what's that guy's name, John Mack. She said, you had him on a long, long time ago. Could you, did you ever think to have him on back again, or ever do this, talk about the subject of UFOs again? And Oprah said, and I'm paraphrasing, I would like to, but I can't. And it might have been a bit longer, but that was basically what she said. Now, take find out what you like. You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm listening.
Okay. Now, when I'm traveling around the world, as I did for 3 years, I literally went around the globe, leaving California and Australia. I was through India, and I made my way up to Dharamsala. There is where the Dalai Lama lives. He's an exile from Tibet, and that's where they have. It's like a Tibetan refugee camp, but it's much nicer. Anyway, that's where everybody goes, and if you put your passport in and wait a week, you can get a private audience with His Holiness. And I did that, and I asked him about the larger brotherhood and sisterhood of man. And again, I had to couch it in a way in which this person, could understand. When it finally came to, for him to gaze in my direction, I asked him if he thought that there were Buddhists on other planets. And, he sort of froze for a minute and squinted his eyes like he does. And he said, I think so. And then went on to talk about this in a much more specific sense. And who else? Okay, everybody knows the movie Grease. Jeff Conaway was one of the guys in Grease. He was also in Taxi, the blonde-haired guy. Before he ended up in Celebrity Rehab, he came over to my house for an interview. And I don't remember what we were... Oh, he had just done a song with his girlfriend, Vicky. Or was it Nikki or Vicky? And, by the way, she also ended up on the Bravo TV show Celebrity Rehab, but never mind that. They both came over, and I was just talking about, I don't know if we were promoting anything at that point. So during the middle of the conversation, I asked him if he had a UFO experience, and he said he absolutely had, and he went on to describe this incredible UFO event where this thing came down and lights were shooting out of it. I mean, it was remarkable. And I should also point out that this was before his, sort of debilitating, drug relapse, which landed him in on the show there with Dr. Drew. In fact, funny enough, he was over at the house, and we had this thing at the house called Deerhorn. It's an elixir that all Chinese people know about. It's got starfish and actual horns of deer, and you put rice wine in it. It sits for a minimum of like 1 year, and it's got all kinds. I mean, it looks like it came out of a laboratory from a Frankenstein set. But it has amazing. It's got ginseng. I mean, it's got amazing healing abilities. And we were standing in the kitchen, and he's like, "Oh, I want to try it." And of course, it has alcohol in it. And I had no idea about Jeff Conaway. I didn't know he was taking these. I didn't know he was on 100 barbiturates a day for his back problems. I had no idea. He looked fit and healthy, and so he gave it. It's hard to pour. It's like this jug, and he poured out this little shot, and he whacked it back, and his eyes lit up, and he says, "Wow, this stuff is amazing." And he said that he was able to hit high notes that he couldn't have hit in years. And after the interview, we emailed back and forth. He said, "I really, really have to get some of this stuff." And I remember I was trying to help him, and I was sending him all this stuff in Chinese, and I said, "You have to go to this store called Wing Hop Fung." It's in Chinatown. It's a great store, by the way. And, it was just back and forth. And I hate to think that, I hope I didn't push him off the wagon when he took this little shot at his deer horn, but it's a true story. Cut to like 6 months later, I was sitting in the now extinct Backstage Cafe in Beverly Hills that is owned and operated by Stuart Copeland's brother, who unfortunately recently died from skin cancer, but it was one of the wackiest, craziest bars in town, looking at the TV, and there's Jeff Conaway on the Celebrity Rehab, getting out of a cab or something. So I called him up, and of course he didn't answer. But he's since sort of straightened himself out a bit, and he's doing a whole lot better. In fact, we're both in a documentary called Dante's Inferno. I do a small part in it, and he's the narrator. So we have a mutual project, funny enough, after all these years.
Yes, and you also are working with, I think, Richard Dolan on a TV project as well. And could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm skipping around so much, and I see we're just jumping out of time. I just wanted to get so much in, but this is we were bumped off the air. We don't have a lot of time. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm working on several reality projects with some cable channels that are really exciting. Richard Dolan and I are partnered up in one, and there's a few others that are dealing with the subject matter of UFOs. And some of them, the one that, in fact, I'll say this, the one that's kicked off this whole conversation, the one that I think is really going to be extraordinary is the one that I was in, literally pitching today at Paramount. And it has to do with the whole paranormal field, but it brings such a scientific weight to it. I think it will be one of these shows that really makes a difference. Now, if it can go through all the steps of getting made, great. It's a lot of hoops to jump through, but I'm doing my darndest. I'm putting in the hours. If people want to see the trailer, by the way, of First Contact or any of these other shows I'm involved in, just go to robsimone.com.
Okay, and tell me more, Rob. One thing I'd like to do before we go is to get your, one last question for you. We've talked in the past dealing with mainly the Illuminati and all, and I have a feeling that this can work with what we were talking about tonight. I believe that it may not be the U.S. military involved in trying to release the information, but it could be groups that are part of the Illuminati or the Bilderberg Group. You talked about the Rockefellers earlier, and I believe that it's went even further back in history, back to 1939, and the War of the Worlds broadcast with Orson Welles, which was indicated later on that it was funded partially with Rockefeller Foundation seed money. But do you think that they are the individuals who are really trying to get the word out about this and are using their tools in Hollywood to get to do it?
Well, that's a good question. The answer to that question is multifaceted, multi-tiered, in many different shades of gray, and mixed in with multiple agendas, some having to do with ideology, some having to do with worldview, some having to do with natural gas and oil, some of them having to do with national security, and some of them having to do with policy, some of them having to do with politics. So you can see that the real answer, which is what I like to give, is extremely complicated, and I would need a flow chart to lay it all out for you. But if I was forced, if you were twisting my arm to give a more concise answer, at the risk of clouding the clarity of it completely, there is, without a doubt, an ongoing contact that has been reported ever since man could scratch out an image on a cave wall. We have seen it time and time again by Air Force pilots. We've seen it time and time again by people on the ground, in the air. Also, we've seen it overlap nuclear facilities. We've seen it overlap people. We've seen it overlap all kinds of things, and not so much on a political scale, but on a completely humanistic scale. So there's only two ways to deal with a problem this big. One of it is cover it up, if you can, and what we call produce confounding evidence to muddy the water. If it's too big to cover up, then that's what you have to do, like crop circles. Now, the ones that are real, which are only a small percentage of them, those you can't cover up. So if you make 100 others that are fake, it gets lost in the background noise. So there's some excellent campaigns that have really been undertaken by these groups, and some of them are well funded and sophisticated and have targeted specific people and areas. Absolutely. Is there a concise one world message? No. And unfortunately, people, if you're looking for a quick answer about what it is and what's going on, it's just not there. When you have to bring to bear everything that is relevant in Western civilization, in the current political climate, in the military-industrial complex, multinational conglomerates, you have to really have a vast vocabulary and understanding of the world that we really live in before you can undertake this presence that has infiltrated it and that has been something that has been manipulated for the better part of 50 years. But there are really good reasons why they do disclose some things and they don't. I have my own opinions about them. I've written them up in endless documents that I think are extremely useful for gauging the current climate of the culture that have to do, because everyone wants to know, won't it make people, run for the border? Won't it make people do this? Won't it make people do that? Well, I've driven across this country, 5 or 6 times. I've talked to everybody. I've traveled the world for 3 years. I've talked to just about everybody, and I've heard perspectives from every corner of the globe. So I have a pretty good idea about what this phenomena would do if it was made, reality, so to speak. And that has been a passion of mine for years now. There's no easy way to say it. Do you think it would be okay? Sure. That's as easy, a quick of an answer as I could possibly give you.
Okay, well, we're out of time for this segment of the show right now. I want to thank you, Rob, again, for being on the show. And robsimone.com, you can find out more information about Rob and the show there. Or you can listen to the show on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. Hour 2 will be with the one and the only Joe Montaldo. So thank you again, Rob. And
thanks a lot.
I hope you have a great day. And we're about to go to break. This is Paul Richard Price with the Prophecy Chronicles, signing off, and we will be back on for Hour 2. Thank you.
See that part right there? So if you could just, you don't have to turn your cell phones off, but just tune them to this key, that would be great. Of course, I don't know what key this is. In the quiet of a shadow, in the corner of a room, darkness moves upon you like a cloud across the moon. You're aware in all the silence of a constant that will turn, like the windmill left deserted, or the sun forever burns. So don't forget to breathe. Don't forget to breathe. Where all life is here, no 11th hour reprieve. So don't forget to breathe. Keep your head above water, but don't forget to breathe. The suffering that you've witnessed and the handprints on the wall, they remind you how it's endless, how endlessly you fall. Then the answer that you're seeking for the question that you found drives you farther to confusion as you lose your sense of ground. So don't forget to breathe. Don't forget to breathe. Where all life is here, no 11th hour reprieve. So don't forget to breathe. Your head above the water, but don't forget to breathe. forget to breathe. You know you are here, but you find you'll want to leave. So don't forget to breathe. Just breathe. Just breathe. Just breathe.
Welcome to the Prophecy Chronicles with your host, Paul Richard Price.
And hello, everybody. We're back for hour 2 with the above-average Joe Montaldo on my show tonight. As you know, Joe is the man of all men on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, the owner, producer, and talk show host himself extraordinaire. And I want to thank you, Joe, for agreeing to be on my show tonight.
Well, thank you, man. It's always good to come on. Besides, I like following behind Rob. He's always fun. I was actually glad to catch up with Rob before this show, because I hadn't talked to him in a while. One of the nice advantages to owning a station, I get to keep track with everybody pretty easily and see what they're up to and their latest things, and then I can always send in questions to y'all. Hey, I need to know this. I need to know this. It's really a nice way of doing things. It makes my life easier. So, what are we chatting about tonight?
Well, we're going to talk about, we're going to keep on the alien theme tonight, and we're going to talk about, is it real or is it Memorex, okay, when it comes to alien abductions. The reason why I bring that up is that even though we know that there's some truth that there may be aliens truly out there and abducting people and doing all sorts of mean, cruel, sadistic, quote-unquote, sexual experiments on these people, okay? We want to know how much of that is real and how much of that could be what the military is using so they can use mind control experimentation, non-lethal weapons research, and so on and so forth, using false memories that they're implanting in people, making them think that they're being abducted by aliens when they're not. So, first of all, we all know who Joe Montaldo is. But first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself anyway.
Well, as you said, I am the owner of the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. I'm also a host of UFO Undercover. Been a host of that show for about 3.5 years. Was hosting Link Up USA before that for about 5.5 years. Giving me almost 8.5, almost closer to 9 years in radio now. Last time I checked, my show was up to about 500 archives. So there's lots of, over 1,000 hours of research for people to go listen to. Also, I'm international director for the International Community for Alien Research, and I own my own construction company out in New Orleans. So I like to keep busy, as you can tell, man. I don't, I just don't like free time anymore, I guess. I get griped at a lot because I don't relax like I used to, but frankly, there's too much going on, and there's too much information that needs to be assimilated in between the military abduction studies we're running and the gray and reptilian questionnaires, and one of these days we'll get the human one up, and the blood type studies. There's just a lot of information coming in that we have to keep track of. Speaking of which, I got a file in my email right now to send over to November Hanson for grays and reptilian studies, because she's the one that's going through all the data. And it's just interesting to watch all this stuff progress. Within the next 5 years, ICAR will have assimilated probably 100-fold more data than all the UFO abduction researchers combined. we're already probably tenfold more than all the UFO researchers combined. Abduction researchers, I should say, because we don't really chase UFOs unless it's mandated or asked by a member or a friend or a contactee, or if it happens to be an area we're working, we may track, hot spots, things like that, to see what's going on. Someone wheezing. What? AJ, whatever it is you smoke, girl, you need to put it out. Put it out. You've had enough for the evening now. Roll it out in the ashtray and say that's good enough. Did we lose Paul again?
No, what's happening is that there is a little bit of distortion in your voice, but we all know that happens. That's part for the course, and we're talking about a really sensitive subject right now. Now, first of all, I want to ask you, you've been doing the UFO abduction research thing for how many years now?
Oh, man, do I have to admit to that on the air? 27 years. Actually, almost 28 years. But, long time. As long as a lot of the old-timers Hey, look, I know where you live, Miss Texas. Sorry, guys, listening to us via the radio. I'm messing with you, man, virtual auditorium. It is, but for me, all this is second nature. 10, 15, let's see. Say 15, 18 years ago, I was working really, really, really hard just to try to figure out if UFOs are real. I mean, I shouldn't say UFOs, but if extraterrestrials were real, if the planet was really being visited, if all these people were Fruit Loops or fruit cakes. So it got a little crazy early on. Now, 28 years later, 27 and a half years later, it's a lot different for me. A lot of the answers I was looking for, I found. A lot of the answers I was looking for, I found. Not always to what I was hoping it to be, or actually some of it scares the living crap out of me, but still, a lot of those answers have been found. A lot of other stuff we're still working on. A lot of new stuff is coming up, because one of the things about this field, every time we think we figure something out, or even if we do figure something out, all it does is lead to 50 more questions. To give you an example, we're working on commonalities amongst abductees for abduction criteria for the organization. It's how we track abductees. Well, how we find out who's real abductees. Well, while doing that, we started seeing anomalies in blood types and eye colors. In certain characteristics, we started seeing anomalies. So we decided we were going to track this and see what we found. And it's an ongoing study, but after almost 2,000 cases, or after 2,000 individual contactees, it's clear cut. There's definitely something that the ETs are looking for or dealing with the Rh negative blood type. So all I did was open up another 50 questions. What are they looking for? What are they using it for? Do they think they're better than positive? What exactly is it that ET wants with these negatives? Are ET the ones that brought the Rh negative in, since it's a mutation that started 25 to 35,000 years ago? See, it just more questions. It answered some questions. It did answer some questions why so many people were, so many contactees were Rh O negative and green eyed. I thought it was a little odd how many of them that we had coming in. Now we know it's actually common amongst contactees to be O negative and green eyed or hazel eyed. It's almost 50% of our abductee base group. So these things, but of course, that leads to more questions. What is it? What is it about this particular Rh negative group that these ETs are so interested in? I mean, it makes up 56 or 58% of the overall contactees. And the two highest things in abduction happen to be mutations in the real world, meaning that Rh negative is a mutation. It mutated from positive. It won't be found in the rhesus monkey bloodstream like Rh positive is. It's a separate total mutation. The other interesting thing is Rh negative was part of that mutation. It's the only universal blood tone, the only one. Everybody on the planet can take O negative. The only blood O negative can take, and yes, AB negative can take O negative. I checked in it to make sure. The only blood type that O negative can take is O negative, which technically makes it the blood type that's most rare, because even though AB negative and AB positive only are 1% of the population, they can actually use O negative blood, which actually makes them about 8% of the population. But O-negative blood, which is only 7% of the population, can only use O-negative blood. None of the other bloods can be used. Now, these are oddball things, but these are mutations. Well, green eyes are a mutation of brown and blue eyes. It's a clear mutation. So we keep finding these mutations in these contactees. Also, it's like when I tell people all the time, we don't even consider you to be a contactee or an abductee if you're not empathic. If you don't possess some type of empathic ability, we're not even going to talk to you. We're going to be like, whatever. It's been nice chatting with you, but you're wasting our time because, frankly, ET don't abduct non-telepathic or non-empathic people. And that's because they abduct in family lines. See, there's some things we can take to the bank. There's some things that we've got to research, and we've got enough cases we can say, okay, we can take this to the bank. But then there's other stuff that we have to sit back and go, what the blank is going on? And, somebody asked me one time, as a matter of fact, at the 2009 X-Conference when I was lecturing, they asked me, they wanted to know why the government would want to abduct contactees. Now, I was almost rude because, I've been doing this a long time, and I got to catch myself every once in a while because I get tired sometimes of doing Abduction 101 or MilLab 101. But why would the government want to abduct abductees? Why do you think they would do it? I mean, come on. First off, you have someone who has now been on board a spacecraft, of course, much more advanced than ours and much more capable than ours. So you're going to want to find out whatever you can. They've also been introduced into a new environment. No telling what kind of diseases or other bacteria they may have been exposed to inside of a new environment. So these are things that you're going to want to check. So, a lot of contactees will tell you, it's like going to the Center for Disease Control when they do quarantine studies. They'll run in and take samples. Well, the ETs the government's basically doing the same things with the abductees, but they're also trying to find out information. Why the aliens are doing what the aliens are doing. Why are they abducting people? What types of technologies can be used? What type of technologies can't be used? Is there any hope for achieving certain types of technologies amongst the abductee group into the military coalition, per se? So, there's lots of reasons for them to abduct them. It's just they're not quite as good at it as ET is.
Well, one thing I want to bring up is, like with my particular case, I had a near abduction experience that I can remember where they were stopped, but I've been told that I may have also had more experiences than what I can remember directly, Joe. And a lot of these deal with, not only the alien issue, but with military abductions and with the fact that the military is abducting people for experimentation purposes and maybe using as a cover the alien abduction phenomenon, which is really kind of rude and mean to people. And the majority of the people being abducted, like Leah Haley and others, by the military are or were abducted by extraterrestrials. In your opinion, what do you think is really going on here? And are they using these particular people and planting false memories so that way they can not only keep track of it, and but also to use them for experimental purposes for other particular programs, such as the non-lethal weapons program and others, and also to find psychic abilities? What are your feelings on that, Joe?
Well, first off, the government does a lot of things with contactees, but first and foremost, you can't be a military abductee if you're not an alien abductee. That kind of goes hand in hand. That's what they're looking for. And no, the government does not find these guys. They do not track every contactee because they don't even know where 10% of the contactees are. Probably don't even know where 1% of them are. 80% of all MilLab cases are famous cases. These are cases that have gone public and the government's learned about and gone backwards in MilLab. Not all of them, but a lot of them. There's also a lot of researchers who were picked up, like in Pensacola Gulf Breeze area. Myself, Leah Haley, Kay Wilson, about a dozen other people in this field have all had military abductions inside Pensacola, Florida. All of us, right there on Santa Rosa Island, if we're going to get technical about it. So there's a whole group of us that are actually live working in this field right now that have all had similar experiences in the same area. What cracks me up is several famous contactees and researchers such as Leah and Kat were actually in Gulf Breeze at the same time we were in Gulf Breeze. Of course, none of us knew each other at the time because we're talking 15, 16 years ago. So none of us really knew each other at the time. But still, we were all there at the same damn time. Now, we could say each of us played off each other's story, but in fact, Leah filed their story, Kay filed hers, we filed ours. All of them were filed with MUFON within weeks of each other. Now, these are weird coincidences, which I have no idea why MUFON didn't catch on to 16 years ago, or actually longer than that, about 23 years ago. I don't know why they didn't catch on to this. They just blew this totally. The only reason I found out about it is I was interviewing Leah Haley and her husband one night, God rest his soul, and they started talking about Pensacola, Florida. Well, I had Kay Wilson on a couple of weeks earlier, and she had started talking about what had happened to her in Pensacola, Florida. Well, we're talking about this about 2 weeks after that. I had on, I can't think of her name right now, and she had experiences in Pensacola, Florida. So at this point, I was kind of like, uh-oh, what the hell? This is way more than a coincidence. There is something solid, tangible, hardcore going on here. But these were all people in one shape, form, or fashion had come forward, meaning like in Linda and our cases, we actually mailed in, and get this, we mailed in this big long letter to MUFON, right? We got the letter back, okay? The envelope had been completely tore up. The letter had been completely tore up. Everything had been taped and put back together and sent back to us in return mail. Now, MUFON did see it somehow or another, but it also came back to us in return mail. Figure this one out. This was really weird. The only reason we knew MUFON seen it because we had called directly and asked them. But when it came back to us, I mean, it had been diced and sliced and chopped into all kind of pieces, and then everything taped back, the envelope, the letter, everything. It was one of those weird, oddball things, but we know the letter was intercepted. It had been intercepted, and the same thing had happened to other researchers at the time. Their mail was being intercepted, and the ones who were having experiences were being messed with, especially the ones that happened to have been in this area at this particular time. This is also the same time that Ed Walters was having his experiences, and others were down there were having experiences. It all fits in and ties in at the same time, and we spent quite a bit of time down there in that first 10 years. Well, we still do. We're just in the last 3 months, we've been to Pensacola 5 times, Gulf Shores 3 times. So we're in the area a lot, and because there's a lot to keep track of there. Oh, can I describe? We don't have enough time for that, Sky. I've seen that question come up in the room, but man, that's just really way involved.
If you want to, Joe, we can go into a third hour if you want.
We can't be preempting Kevin Smith, man. I got his numbers looking good now. We can't be preempting him, but the only person that gets to preempt Kevin Smith is Angela Joyner on Friday night. And look at that free plug. Look at that, snuck in that plug. Gosh, that was cool. But to make a long story short, I tell you what, I give you a quick story because we're going down now. We got ICAR members in New Orleans, all right. About 12 ICAR members are in New Orleans. Come down after Katrina to come check out everything and to hang out with us and make sure we were okay and so on. We all load up in the truck, okay? It's foggy like you won't believe. I mean, foggy like you won't believe. Jason Wilson, our Texas State Director, a lot of the radio people know who he is. So we get in the truck, we're driving down there, right? It's fog. I mean, a fog you can't see your hand in front of your face. To start off with, guys, we were in this fog for 16 to 17 hours driving back and forth nonstop, okay? So we get to Blue Mountain Beach, Florida. And so we get down to Blue Mountain Beach, Florida. It's foggy, I mean, intense fog. We pull up down there. We get out the truck. Everybody piles out. I mean, because we've been crammed in there like sardines for 4 hours. We get out, everybody files out. We walk out to the beach. We're standing on the water. And we get in a circle. And just a circle. We were just talking. It wasn't even intentional. It's just how it worked out. We got in a fairly big circle. Well, we're standing there talking. While we're standing there talking, the fog just opens. Not behind us, just on top of us. It created a beautiful, perfect circle where you could look up and see the stars. Beautiful. Well, we were all kind of a little weirded out, but nothing, nothing like E.T. We didn't see no E.T.s. A couple of people thought they might have seen something at the corner of their eye, but nothing. So we get back in the truck. We drive back to Navarre Beach, Florida, near Eglin Air Force Base, matter of fact. There's a national park right there. It's right where Navarre hits the national park and the military base. We get out the truck. The girls are walking ahead of us, 20, 30 feet. Maybe less, maybe more. And it's foggy. And all of a sudden, between them and us, we see footprints in the sand. Not human footprints, mind you. At first we thought it was a kid, and then we were trying to figure out how a kid got between them and us. We were kind of like, what the hell? So we're talking to them up in the fog. We couldn't see them, but we could hear them. We're talking to them. We're picking up the pace of the walk, and we're narrowing the gap between us. And we haven't told them what we were seeing yet. As we got closer to them, you could actually make out a figure between them and us. Now, y'all can figure out what it was, but I will tell you this. On that beach, on no less than 10 different occasions, we've seen grays on the beach with multiple witnesses. Figure that one out. I can't get into all the stories because all of them, even that one would take much longer to explain because there's a lot more that went on that night. But on that particular part of that beach, on at least 10 occasions, we've seen grays with other people. And on at least 24 more occasions, we've had multiple types of experiences all up and down that section of the beach. There is more that goes on right there than probably most places in the world, not just in the States. It's a very high activity area for E.T. We learned early on that E.T. bring people there. We couldn't figure out early on why we were getting all these different contactees from around the country that were having experience in Gulf Breeze, and then we realized it. Navarre, Pensacola, Gulf Breeze, Santa Rosa Island, Destin are all ideal vacation spots. So we started checking into this. People were being pulled down there. They're drawn down there. They take their whole family to go down. They check in a hotel for 7 days. You see them checking in. You see them checking out. Nowhere in between that time do you see them on the camera at the hotel ever. There's no expenses on their credit card. As far as you can tell, the rental cars haven't got any mileage on them, and they've only got like 2 or 3 days worth of pictures and no other memories. They're taking these families for weeks at a time. It's something it's one of the things we busted early on. I can't believe how MUFON in other cases actually blew this. This was easy to figure out, these multiple cases down there being drawn down there from other states and other countries so they could be abducted in groups. Because whatever goes down on there, and I've seen this personally more than 5 times, and I know other people with us have seen it several times, they like to abduct in big groups. Whole hotels sometimes you see streaming out. It's some of the damnedest things. The first time I ever seen this, I thought I'd lost my mind. If it wouldn't have been for corroborating witnesses from other states that happened to been there, not knowing us, that happened to see this as well, I would have never known. I just thought I lost my mind. It's also the place where Linda got burns up and down her arms. Figure this out. We're sitting on the beach, me, her, and my son, who's about 2 years old at the time. And we got a blanket over our laps. Now, my son's sitting on top of my lap, so he's his head and his arms, he's bald-headed, because his baby's bald-headed. And his arms are exposed, and my arms are exposed. Well, I seen this thing coming over the beach. I'm not going to get into detail about it, but I seen this thing coming over the sand dune, and I ran over there, and I'm like 25, I think, at the time. And I'm jumping around hollering like a maniac, because this thing's hovering over the beach, hovering over the sand dune and working its way out to the water. So I run back. I'm talking to Linda. I'm now standing up. My son's in the covers. My wife's sitting there covered up to where her arms are at, and I'm still standing up. This thing passes over us, right? So it's like the next morning, Linda gets up, and from above her elbow all the way to her arm, to her hand, was a diamond burn. It was like somebody had taken one of those diamond grids and just heated it up and wrapped it around her arm. It was one of the damnedest things I have ever seen. I was just stunned when I seen it. And there's no conscious memories of anything else going on that night other than seeing those things and seeing her arms. Now, under regression, we found out other stuff, but that's a whole other thing in itself. It is just a very, very high activity. And I can tell you this, I have brought, in the last 5 years, I have brought about 50 people to golf leagues. I can only think of 2 that didn't have experiences. That's it. 2. And I think that's because they weren't experiencers or contactees. I think that's what that was. Paul, did you fall asleep? Wake up.
I'm awake and I'm listening. I am quietly listening to the great Joe Montaldo. Okay, Joe, people are wondering about my experience at NASA, and that could be for another show. Yes, I did work as cook for the Johnson Space Center back in 1990-91, was fired for talking about a top-secret classified propulsion project, and was watched ever since by, the men in black, quote-unquote. And however, there are other issues about, when I was younger, I was watched by the military and by the United States government, where they did do a series of tests on my intelligence and all. They found out that I am parapsychic, and, there's a lot more to that story. And there is a file on me, a classified file, that indicates that I may have been abducted and that the government knew about it. Now, that's another thing I want to talk about, Joe. If the government knows about it, then why in the heck aren't they trying to stop it?
Well, because they can. How the hell are they going to stop it? They ain't got no way to stop it. They don't have any way to stop ET. What are they going to do, say, all right, Mr. Gray, knock it off, you naughty bastard? Well, no, that's not going to work. It's just not. I mean, unfortunately for us, and unfortunately for the government, we just don't possess that level of technology yet. We're a far cry from making ET stop abduction. And the best I could tell, bare minimum, I'd have to say ET's been here 10,000 years. If you go by the cave drawings in Europe, 50,000 years at least. So somewhere between 50 and 10,000 years, ET's been here screwing around in our society. That tells you right there. They lasted space travel at least 50,000 years ago, so they're at least 50,000 years more advanced than we are. In reality, they're probably several million to several hundred million years more advanced than we are. So really, that's why I get so mad about researchers sometimes. Really trying to understand this is really hard. Let's be realistic about this. How are we going to understand a race, even if it's 1,000 years more advanced than us? If you go back just 100 years in the United States, and you try to explain what we're doing right now and all the equipment in front of me, they would think we were witches. Matter of fact, we'd be getting burnt as witches. Video screens popping up, people's faces talking. Oh no, you're a witch, man. Big lighters. No, it's not going to happen. You're a witch. You're gonna toast. There's just no comparisons, and there's no way for them to understand. There's no reference. There's no way to make a person 100 years ago understand, maybe a scientist understand what a computer is. 500 years ago, it's like gibberish. The time of Christ, 2,000 years ago, anything that we're doing right now would be considered a miracle or some type of demonic thing. There would be just no way to make them understand what it is. So it's the same thing for us. Simply, a lot that goes on with ET just looks like magic to the average person because, frankly, they cannot understand. We know it's technology. We understand it's technology, but we don't understand the technology and probably won't for several million years. It's just beyond our limited education. Now, if it's true and we are a mix between the 2 or 3 races, then maybe we'll learn faster and get the information quicker. But who knows? We just don't know. It's a hard thing to see. I mean, I've been watching since I've been alive for 47 years. Technology is tenfold more advanced than it was when I was a young man. I mean, come on, I had black and white TV with like 2 channels in the area. What, a remote? What? What the hell is a remote? Yeah, a remote is get off your big ass and go click the knob. That's what the remote was. Or like Grandpa hitting you with the stick to go change the channel or something like that. That was the remote. And then we got color. Oh my God, we got color. I was like, color TV, wow. Then we got remotes, and then we got 8-tracks. Oh, I was really impressed with the 8-tracks. Then we got cassettes and CDs and micro CDs, and now we got high definition. Oh, man, we got all kind of fun stuff now. It's just a different world. And I grew up in the world, and I have degrees in electronics, and I even have a hard time understanding this stuff sometimes. So, trying to make people understand. Sorry about that, guy. There's lightning outside. My dog's flipping. But, trying to make people understand this is almost beyond a realistic view. We're trying to learn, and we're trying to simulate and collect data and try to get a handle on why ET may be here. But frankly, when I hear my PLNL brothers tell me, oh, they've come here to save us and bless us and kiss us and love us, and I'm thinking, well, what the hell have they been doing for the last 10,000 years? Apparently they haven't been doing that. Anytime somebody tells an alien's here to save us, all you got to do is look at the planet and realize that's a load of crap. If anybody was here to save us, they wouldn't be, it'd be easy for them to get the world united. Simply, they could just do it. But you don't see none of that. It looks more like, to me, when you look at, if you judge the aliens by their actions, and solely by their actions and nothing else, they're in this for their own reasons, their own needs, and their own ideas. We're part of agenda. We're not even the total agenda. We're just part of it. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, or what that means in the end days, or whenever this may stop, which, if it's been going on this long, it may be going on another 50, 100,000 years. They may be here to watch us evolve into the next advanced sentient species in our galaxy. We just don't know, because frankly, we're idiots. We're children. We ain't even got out the womb yet. We've managed to send about 100 guys and gals outside the womb for a quick peek. And we sent a couple of probes outside a little further, but still, that's about as far as we've got. We're still stuck in the womb, trying to get out. One day we'll grow up and we'll get out and move out and sprawl through the solar system and start spreading out through the solar system and eventually spread out into the galaxy. Then we'll be out the womb. But until then, no, we're just hanging out, going, well, yeah, aliens look cool, man. Let's make a movie, yeah. And and I do agree that they are trying to dissimulate us. By the way, I was listening to you and Rob. I do think they're trying to desensitize us to the extraterrestrial situation, I guess I should say.
Well, do you mind if I could ask you, Joe, before we get into any more Q&A with the chat rooms and all, I want to ask you a question. You were a part of a military abduction, and with that, I have heard interviews with Leah Haley and others that indicate that they recognize the military personnel who were involved in their abductions. And she claims a man by the name of Bulldog, which I found out later was Dr. Lieutenant Colonel John Alexander. She remembers seeing him during quite a few of her abductions. And John believes in UFOs. He was a member of the National Institute for Discovery Sciences, and he was a member of the well-known spook group, the Aviary. Now, do you remember seeing John? And if so, what are your thoughts on the matter?
Nah, actually, most of the people we've seen, it's like the Red-Headed Doctor. We've seen them. We've seen a couple of other what looked to be hybrids. There were some grays present on a couple of the occasions. There were military people there, but most of them seemed to be standoffish and standing off in the distance. And it's another one of the reasons I really don't like using the term military abduction, because it's not exactly military, but it's hard to explain. But they were more standoffish. They are, a lot of times, they do take contactees a lot of times and interrogate them. Sit them down in a chair and tell you, I've never had that happen, at least not that I remember. I know I've argued with them, I've struggled with them, I've gotten really hacked off and taken swings at them and stuff like that, but I don't really remember seeing anybody. Now, in the contactees and abductees, I've seen people I knew, and I've seen from other abductions. But as far as military personnel, not so much. And it's happened to us more than one time, and usually, almost every time, it's somebody different. And it has a lot more to do with, like, when we were out near the NASA facility, the Stennis facility in Mississippi, there was a bunch of us picked up there, and there was some really wild stuff went on in that case. And but it was a different group. It wasn't the same group that picked us up. When we got picked up in Pensacola, it was a different group. When we got picked up coming out of D.C., coming back to Louisiana, it was a different group. It's almost like a different handler. You know, they come in, and in some of those there was no one present but military, and in some cases there was military and extraterrestrial present. You know, it's almost like E.T.'s checking up on what Uncle Sam is doing, as well as Uncle Sam's checking up on what E.T.'s doing. It's kind of weird when you would get into it, but it is something that we check regular basis. And the military abductions are serious stuff, and like I said before, they shouldn't be called military because it's more like a little piece of the military, a little piece of the private industry, a little piece of the government, a little piece of some special ops and special interest groups combined into one organization that tracks and does this. And they probably have strategic positions all around the country, all around the world for that matter. Because we know military abductions are not just a U.S. exclusive thing. I don't hear of many out of China and India and places like that, but then we don't know if they're even being told about it, or even if the Chinese and Indians have that sophistication level of technology yet. I don't think even Russians have gotten that far along the line yet. So, frankly, I don't think you're going to hear about it now. Because, you know, you got to be able to pick up the contactee, do everything you're going to do, and try to at least assimilating back into a normal life. I think what happens in cases like mine and Leah Haley's and Kay Wilson's and Jim Sparks and some of the other ones is the more advanced contactees, the ones that retain more memory and are more actively working in the field or in the role or messing with the ETs, tend to remember more, and I think it's harder for the government to wipe those memories without causing, damage. I mean, without, wiping normal memories. So I think in a lot of cases they let you remember. Because really, most of the military abductions, with the exception of two, I pretty much remember start to finish. Not that I really want to, but the memories are there. So, and there are a couple of cases like the one out at NASA and the one in the tunnel in Virginia. All I remember is there was military present. I don't know what went on, what happened. I think I was knocked out both times the entire time. I know I wasn't happy, I can tell you that much. But other than that, I couldn't really tell you what went on. So it does vary. And most of the time when you see aliens present in military abductions, it's usually the Greys. Every now and then there'll be a human-type alien present, but it's usually the Greys. And if you ever see three aliens together, like the reptilians, the Greys, and the humans, watch and see. And unless it's one of the little small automaton Greys, the reptilians and the humans will give way to the Grey. If it's one of the 5 or 7 foot Greys, they will get out of their way. They will not bother with them. They will not mess with them. They will step out of the way and let the Grey go on about and do his business. And from what I've been told from all 3 contactee groups, yes, the Greys are definitely more advanced than the other ones are. From what I understand, of a magnitude of probably 100-fold. It's just one of those things that, and this all information, we have so many contactees now. When I got involved with this, I knew 2. And then 10 years later, I knew about 50. And then 15 years later, I knew about 200. 20 years later, I knew about 2,000. Almost 30 years later, we know about 12,000. And actually, it's probably a much larger number than that because a lot of the stuff like the Pal Talker stuff where we're just talking or people are calling in or people are getting involved and just giving their information, but we're not documenting it. We don't even count those cases. So, I mean, the amount of information is staggering these days. It's staggering.
Well, I've got a question for you. In effect, if there are military abductions and abductees are being used for experiments, as was indicated in the article written by Martin Cannon, the controllers, if that be the case, and, I'm not saying what you're saying is not correct, Joe, but if that be the case, could that explain why Martin Cannon was threatened by people like Gordon Ovell on behalf of John Alexander to keep him quiet, and why he got out of...
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Now, what that is disinformation. That goes back to the stuff we've been talking about. ICAR's on a new kick about what's considered credible information and what's not, and how many of these so-called sources are legit and how many are not. What we found in the last 10 years is the amount of information coming out that is disinformation is ridiculous. They'll use military abductions to spread disinformation. They'll use regular abductions to spread disinformation. You'll have people all the time, because like I've told this to 100 million different people, we've been at war for 25 years. Any military or any government or anybody coming out and disclosing anything is committing treason, and it's punishable by death. So you can pretty much rule out that they're doing any of that. So when you start having people say they're being abundantly threatened or messed with or bothered with, more than likely it's a form of disinformation. Not always, because I do know several contactees and several researchers that have been threatened on more than one time. Not often in today's society, but a decade or so or more ago, it did happen fairly frequently. Not that they really did anything; it was just more of a wake-up call to keep you off of a particular topic. But it seems like these days it's a lot different. But most of the stuff we found is disinformation. It's a way to keep the community arguing amongst itself. That way we can never get any real credible evidence put together, because we're too busy fighting with ourselves. It was a really good plan. It still works today. It's been an effective plan in the field since MUFON was formed, and it's going to stay one, because frankly, too many people, it's like, some of the forms we've talked about before, and some of the things they allow as credible evidence, or the things they allow out. These things get in the mainstream, and then of course they're proven to be hoaxes or illegitimate, and then it makes the whole field look bad. But the disinformation works really good. You've got groups like ours that are working really, really hard to set up abduction criteria and to show a credible line of research and a credible group of contactees moving forward. But then you've got all these other people coming out with this MILAB theory or that MILAB theory or this, and they really can't base them. They've talked to one contactee or one military abductee, and then they form, a theory or hypothesis or something. You can't do that. You just can't. It's not. And then when you have people telling you outrageous things, there's ways to check them. One, you can start by bringing in a group of empathic contactees, because they can tell you right off the bat if they're lying or telling the truth right off the get-go. If you get a consensus either way, they're either telling the truth or they're lying, one or the other. And there's other ways besides that. There are forms of truth serums and hypnotherapy and lie detectors and voice stress analysis. There's lots of ways to verify stuff. And it's just not getting done. So when I start hearing people making, claims or reports and things like that, I'm like, look, back it up with something. If you're out there telling us that people are threatening you, you tell us why they're threatening you, what it is that you know that they're threatening you for. If they don't want you speaking, give us an idea of what that is. Because frankly, it's safer if people know about it. If you keep quiet, nobody knows about it, they can do away with you easy, because there's nothing to keep them from doing. So you have to take that in consideration if you are being threatened, or if that is really going on. But like I said, I do think most of what's out there right now is information. I would say probably 80 to 90% of what makes up ufology today is absolute and total disinformation. Nothing more, nothing less than disinformation. It's like Roswell. I think a lot of the Roswell information was planted just to keep the community fighting amongst each other, and it's done a great job. It's been fantastic. If you could go right now, we could host a convention right now, right this moment, and invite every major ufologist in the field in, and ask them about 5 different cases. 2 they would probably agree on, the other 3 they would be arguing about for days. Then you could ask them all about government sources. You ever notice that every ufologist has a government source? Have you ever noticed that? Everyone. And that's impossible, guys. That means our government would be leaking like a sieve. Y'all see what they're trying to do to the poor guy who was in Afghanistan. They want to put him to death. And you really think people are going to put their lives at line because of this? The ufology thing is the most serious secret kept in our government. and you think we're going to allow that out? We don't even let stuff out from World War I yet. It's still secrets being kept that you will never find out about. Let me explain this to the average listener. If the government don't want you to know, you ain't going to know. That's bottom line. That's how you know almost every person who comes out with these wild stories that this admiral or this lieutenant or this person that worked for Boeing or this person that worked for Lockheed. No, you're not going to break your security agreement because you can go to prison for life for that. And if you're military and you break it, it's a death sentence. So you're not going to do it. And besides that, and more importantly, everybody who's working inside the echelon of what's really the ufology world are hand-picked. They're not going to go rogue. They're not going to run off. They're highly paid, highly motivated, extremely intelligent individuals, and you're not going to turn them. They're just like the Minuteman guys who run our missile systems. You're not going to turn these guys. You're not going to make them turn against the government. You're not going to make them go rogue. You're not going to make them give out secrets. They're conditioned not to do that. And this is the hardest part for me to get across to the damn ufology field. Stop believing the bullshit and start looking for the real stuff, the real truth. Get away from the garbage. 99 and 9/10 of every conspiracy out there is total garbage and total disinformation. You ever notice the Twin Towers? We were making headway on the 911 on the Twin Towers, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, we got all these 911 conspiracies going. Whether it's true or not, we got them going. All that did was pollute it and dilute it. Now we will never, ever know the truth of what happened on 911. Ever. Simply because half the people listening are listening to bullshit and listening to lies. And they just spread it more and we'll never get to the truth. Whether we did it, whether someone else did it, whether it was really what it was supposed to be, we will never know because as a group, we can't clear out the bullshit because, and a lot of this has to deal with fame, fortune, and attitude, ego. That's what a good part of this is just ego. They want to be top dog. There's lots of good information out there, and there's lots of credible research that can be done. That if you want to be top dog, you can be top dog. You don't have to make up shit and buy the total BS. Who did it, though? I see people telling me all the time 911 was an inside job. You ain't not going to tell me George Bush did 911. I'm sorry, guys. One, he hadn't been in office long enough to pull or organize something that advanced. And two, he's not that smart. You want to blame it on Clinton? Go ahead, but Clinton ain't that smart either. And the secret government working without the FBI, CIA, or NSA catching on to it, that ain't happening either. So there's things you can go by that you can say, okay, that's total BS. Now, did some other group inside the country arrange it? That's quite possible. But none of us will know that because none of y'all can agree. It's my point. Y'all are making my point for me. You will never. It's like the Barack Obama thing. We all know he should put his birth certificate up on the air. We all know that. Everyone listening to the show knows that the man should just put his birth certificate on the internet, not his certificate of live birth, but his birth certificate, and everybody would shut up and leave him alone and let him do his job, and all the lawsuits would go away, and that would be the end of it. But he hasn't. But because we're a split nation, and half of us just want to believe him because I don't even know why we want to believe him, it's never going to happen. It's never going to get challenged. And we're going to leave a fraud in our government until we vote into the next one. It's ridiculous.
Well, one thing I want to, there have been a lot of questions, and I know you've read them in the chat room, Joe, about Doggone and, the Doggone Chronicles. What, briefly, before we have to end the show tonight, can you tell us on your thoughts on that?
On the Doggone? The Doggone, oh Lord, the Doggone are one of my favorite subjects. It's a shame we don't have more time, but the Doggone, doggone, huh? The Doggone are an ancient tribe. They're pretty sure they came from the Egyptians, or the early Egyptians. They weren't even Egyptians at the time, but they're relatives of the Egyptians. They're in northern Africa, living in a village out there. They have no written language. They may now, but at the time they didn't. It's only spoken, and all their literature is handed down, or all their information is handed down by stories from each generation to the next. What makes them interesting is 500 years ago, they drew cave drawings of the human circulatory system, the blood system. Now, without a microscope, there's really no way to see this. Okay, that's just weird. We'll say that's an anomaly. secondly, they worship the dog star, Sirius B. Sirius, yeah. What's interesting about this is you can't see it by the naked eye. It's invisible. We didn't find, I think, until 1918, a radio telescope picked it up. And that's how we found it. It's invisible. Another interesting thing is the Dogon's calendar is set to a 55.5-year calendar, which happens to be the precise orbit of Sirius B, 55.5 years. Not only that, they knew the mass of the star. How in the hell can they know the mass of the star? How in the hell could they know the orbit of the star or even know that it was there? To take it further, they talked about Sirius C, which was recently found in the 60s. Here are two stars that these guys worshipped and knew about that we didn't even know existed until the last century. They just had advanced information, and they're not the only tribe that's had advanced information. There have been other tribes that have had information beyond their years. And there's only certain ways you can find this out. How could they find out about these two stars without a radio telescope? There's no way. Someone had to tell them about it. They also believe in the Numos, which is one of the races that came here, the reptilians, amphibians we call them. They landed and went into the water, and they would come out and talk to the Dogon. They're the ones that created life. What I find interesting about that story is it ties into the Christian Bible and to the Sumerian, Egyptian, and Mesoamerican stories about the reptilians bringing life or sentience to our planet. Not necessarily life, but intelligence, which kind of cracks me up in itself because, of course, in the Bible, we know Eve took a bite of the apple and became self-aware. She started to clothe herself. We know in the Sumerian text that the reptilians used to come in and steal the women, rape them, and the children born were much different, much smarter, much brighter, much faster. We also know these same things happened in the Mesoamerican tribes. So here we have a story, conjecture, lecture, whatever you want to call this, that appears in all of the cultures on the planet. So there's something real there. There's something solid real. Now, in today's world, we have to contact these, talking about these very things and these very aliens that were tied back to our ancient ancestors. To me, it all kind of makes a lot of sense. It kind of worries me a little bit, too, because it looks like they're intervening not only in our mental development, but in our physical development. But then they don't seem to be interfering in our social development. Now, this is something I want to launch with ICAR. Why would an alien race be interested in our physical and mental development, but not our social development?
Well, maybe because they're trying to give us freedom of choice, to make our own destinies, to be the masters of our own destinies. What do you think?
Let's take it one step higher. If they're going to make that group completely telepathic, given complete telepathic and empathic abilities, then there's no need to acclimate them to a social environment because now you're automatically social. Because everything in your head is heard by everyone else around you. So it's a much different, so you don't have to acclimate them into our social environment because it's going to be a new type of social environment, a much different type of social environment. So I guess there is no real need to acclimate. It was a trick question, but you know how it is. But Paul, we're 5 minutes over, man, so take us out of here.
Well, I want to thank you again, Joe, for being my guest for hour 2. And Joe, do you have a website, if we didn't already know it already, you would like to tell my listeners about?
Okay, www.paranormalradionetwork.com. Come tune in. www.icar1.com. Largest UFO organization in the world. Come in, fill out a report, tell us what you think. And y'all don't need to know the rest of the websites.
Okay, and you can find out more about me at paulrichardprice.com. And if you would, to help support the show, go ahead and donate 50 cents, $1, whatever you can afford. And I'd like to thank you again, Joe, for being on the show. And I'd like to thank my listeners. I will be on same bat time, same bat channel next week. You will find the truth here. What you do with it is up to you. This is Paul Price signing off with the Prophecy Chronicles. Until next week, have a good day and God bless you.